Donald Trump today hit with his first loss in court of his second term. Comes just 3 days after being sworn in, and it's connected to a central issue, immigration. In a blistering ruling, a federal judge in Seattle halted Donald Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship, the right that is enshrined in the Constitution that grants automatic citizenship to children who are born on American soil. The judge in the case, a Ronald Reagan appointee, called Trump's order, quote, blatantly unconstitutional, and added, quote, I've been on the bench for over 4 decades. I can't remember another case where the question presented is as clear as this one, end quote. The judge scolded the Trump DOJ lawyer arguing this case, quote, frankly, I have difficulty understanding how a member of the bar could state unequivocally that this is a constitutional order. It just boggles my mind. The judge issuing his ruling from the bench after only 25 minutes of arguments. It stops Donald Trump's order from taking effect for 14 days, giving the Trump DOJ time to respond. Now, Trump came into office vowing a radical change to the country's immigration system, from sweeping raids and crackdowns to rewriting the Constitution. And on day 3, he's hitting his first setback. Joining our conversation now, Kristy Greenberg, former federal prosecutor, SDNY Criminal Division, and Deputy Chief of the SDNY Criminal Division, and MSNBC legal analyst, as well as Howard Dean, former DNC Chair and the former governor of Vermont. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Kristy, let me start with you. I've got my pocket Constitution. You know me well. I don't know that much about the law, but I read it, and it's a relatively clear 14th Amendment that states what this case is. Talk to me about the legality of this. There were a lot of people who were asking on Monday, can he even do this?
No, he can't. And the judge actually was very clear that he can't. I mean, this is a really fundamental principle of citizenship by birth within the United States. This is clear. The terms in the Constitution are explicit. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. And there is history dating back to 1898. The United States Supreme Court looked at this very question and deemed that the 14th Amendment, as applied to children born of resident aliens, are citizens. So, and then you also have congressional law that defines nationals and citizens of U.S. at birth to include people born in the United States. So this is very, very clear. And then so the question is, if the law is clear, as the judge said, he was, shocked that that a lawyer would even get up in court and argue that this was constitutional when it's so clearly not. The question then becomes, well, what's going on here? And I think there are really 2 things that are going on. One, you have an attempt at a power grab. We know that the Supreme Court has an expansive vision of presidential power from the presidential immunity opinion. And so this is their opening shot to see how far they can push the judiciary to really expand presidential power. That's one. But I think the second is really more what's going on, which is really they're trying to control the narrative. This isn't really about the law at all. This is really about controlling the narrative on immigration, creating this us versus them mentality so that we can talk about immigrants coming to this country illegally to have children and the rest of us having to then pay for those children, creating this climate of fear and anger and stoking that. And I think in that conversation, there's a fear for the judiciary, a fear for undocumented persons, and a fear for the people who are defending them. So I think those are really the 2 things that are animating Trump's move here.
Howard, good to see you again, by the way. Let's talk about this. This is not it's not a slam dunk. There are a bunch of executive orders that Donald Trump signed that can take some effect and that can have effect almost immediately. This isn't one of them. So there's a bit of a surprise as to why, given every likelihood that what happened today was going to happen. Some judge was going to say, I don't know if you've read your Constitution lately, you can't do this.
Well, the thing that worries me is you've got a Supreme Court that's basically a right-wing, partisan, and in some cases corrupt Supreme Court, which is business, which they've made their reputation rubber stamping stuff like of this kind that Trump has done, and then saying it was okay and it was constitutional. So while this judge, a Reagan appointee, as you pointed out, it seems to be upholding the law, there's no guarantee that's going to happen as it works its way up the court system. So I'd be interested what Kristy has to say about this, because I'm deeply worried about what the Supreme Court is going to do. They just make stuff up and they think nothing about doing it, and they've done it again and again and again.
So, Kristy, let's examine this. Both of you have suggested that the goal here, and I think both of the stories that you suggested, one is that there's an anti-immigrant narrative there, but let's talk about the other one, the idea that this goes up the legal chain. There is a part of this constitutional amendment, the 14th Amendment, that, as you said, has been tried and tested before the Supreme Court to demonstrate that it's actually about people born in the United States, regardless of whether their parents were citizens, or a continuation of the 13th Amendment, which didn't grant people citizenship because they were enslaved. In this amendment, it talks about being subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof and are citizens of the United States. What does that mean, and why are some people saying that's the rub for the Trump case?
Yeah, so Trump is trying, and his DOJ are trying to argue that the 14th Amendment excludes children born of parents who are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, meaning people who are unlawfully in the United States. And I think rightfully the judge asked, well, what does that mean? Of course, even if somebody is not here legally, they're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Aren't they subject to United States laws? Couldn't you prosecute them? And the lawyer for the DOJ said, well, they're subject to our laws, and yes, of course we could prosecute them. So I think it's a really strained argument to try to use this phrase to really try to create exceptions. I don't think it would work. There are some exceptions to the 14th Amendment. For example, children of foreign diplomats are not considered, that is considered an exception.
But that's an important distinction, right, Kristy? Because foreign diplomats are not, I'm an immigrant to this country, I'm subject to all the same laws that the two of you are, but as a diplomat, I'm actually not. So that's an actual real exemption. Doesn't apply to most people, right?
Does not apply to most people. And what you're going to see Trump's DOJ try to do is really try to widen that net of exceptions that apply. And as the judge pointed out in the hearing today, it's a really strained argument because, as you point out, the laws do apply to most people in the United States. Diplomats are a very, unique and specific, narrow example.
Howard, one of the things that this has served to do is, and I wouldn't have guessed that this would be the first thing to do this, but it's created it's coalesced opposition to Trump in the form of 18 states that have filed suit against this, including one attorney general in Connecticut who is himself a beneficiary of birthright citizenship. I wouldn't have thought this is the one that was going to cause people to say, hold on, we can actually stand up to some of this nonsense, but that is happening.
Well, I think I would disagree. This is not his first one. His first one was pardoning essentially cop killers, which even the Fraternal Order of Police, which endorsed him, has a problem with that. So I'm not sure what his game is. Maybe his game often is, I'll do something outrageous so you'll forget about the outrageous thing I did the day before. That's how the Greenland annexation, I think, came about, was trying to divert attention from the fact that he was about to be sentenced as a convicted felon in New York, which he now has been. So who knows what game he's playing and what he's trying to do. But his MO is just to throw as much street stuff at the wall as possible and see what sticks. And I think that's what's going on here.
Kristy, let's discuss. There's the appellate route we discussed, and then there's this other thing, the lawsuits by the states. Is that a different process? Is that a number of state lawsuits? How does that work? And how might these states and their governors and attorneys general push back against this attempt?
Right. So you have a number of different states that are looking at this all around the country. I believe there's another lawsuit going on in Massachusetts. But this injunction right now is a temporary restraining order, which can, again, temporarily block the executive order from taking effect. But in 2 weeks, they come back February 6th, and the judge will determine after a hearing whether or not this is a preliminary injunction. And again, the question is this nationwide, or is this cabin to the states that bring it? And you heard Trump's DOJ really pushing here for this not to be taken into effect nationwide, for this to be very specific to the states who brought it. But that really doesn't make sense. If one person travels from one state to another, it shouldn't affect what their citizenship is. So I think we can expect, even as these state AGs bring these lawsuits around the country, you're really going going to then see a nationwide ban in effect, it would just be too hard to implement otherwise, which ultimately means that we're going to get the showdown in the Supreme Court if these states decide, differently from one another about whether there should be this ban in the first place.